My name is Celine, and I'm 45 years old. The day my daughter told me I was better off dead, something inside me broke beyond repair. It wasn't just a cruel sentence thrown in anger. It was the echo of years I spent trying to love her through every storm. My daughter's name is Aria. From the moment she was born, I believed she was my reason to live. I lost my husband, Dean, when she was only 6 years old. He was my first love, my best friend, and losing him felt like someone had ripped the ground out from under me. But I kept going for her. For my little girl with the bright eyes and the wild curls who used to say, "Mommy, you're my favorite person in the whole world." For a long time, that sentence was the only thing that kept me breathing. Aria was everything to me. I worked long hours, 2 jobs at times, just to make sure she never felt the emptiness I did. I was determined she would never go hungry, never feel small or unworthy. When she wanted a dress for her school dance, I skipped dinner for 2 nights so I could buy it. When she needed braces, I picked up a weekend shift at the diner. Every decision I made revolved around her. I thought that kind of love would build an unshakable bond. But love, I learned, doesn't always grow equally on both sides. When Aria turned 16, she started pulling away. The little girl who used to climb into my lap to tell me about her dreams now rolled her eyes when I asked how her day went. She'd spend hours on her phone, comparing our modest life to her friends' fancy homes. "You don't understand, Mom," she would say. "Other people have real lives." Those words stung more than I could ever admit. I thought maybe it was just teenage rebellion, a phase that would pass. But the phase became a pattern, and the pattern became a wall I couldn't climb over. As the years passed, our conversations turned into arguments. I'd ask her to come home for dinner, and she'd say she was too busy. I'd tell her I missed her, and she'd sigh like I was being dramatic. Then one evening, during yet another argument about money and choices, she snapped. "You always make everything about you," she shouted. "You act like a victim, Mom. The best gift will be the day you're gone." I remember that moment vividly. Her words sliced through the air like glass. For a second, the world around me went completely silent. I could see her face angry, trembling, but all I could hear was the echo of that sentence bouncing around inside me. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry in front of her. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the child I had given everything to. Then she stormed out of the house, and I heard her car drive away. I waited for her to come back, but she never did. That night, I sat on the floor of her empty room. Her posters still hung on the walls, her perfume still lingered in the air. I held one of her old sweaters against my chest and cried until my throat burned. Every tear that fell wasn't just for her cruelty, it was for the years that led us here. For every bedtime story, every birthday cake, every sacrifice that now meant nothing, I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Days turned into weeks. I didn't hear from her. My friends told me I should move on, that sometimes children grow cold and there's nothing a parent can do. But I couldn't accept that. She wasn't just my daughter, she was my purpose. Without her, I felt hollow. I stopped going out, stopped smiling. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt like a tomb. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, by cooking meals I couldn't finish, by pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But every quiet evening reminded me of the words that had shattered my heart. I started keeping a journal around that time. It began as a place to vent, but slowly, it became something deeper, a record of a mother's love, of her pain, of everything left unsaid. I wrote about Aria's first steps, her first day of school, her favorite songs. I wrote about the way she used to braid my hair and say I looked like a princess. I wrote until the pages were damp with tears. Writing was the only way I could still talk to her without being shut out. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd whisper her name into the darkness and imagine she could hear me somewhere. I still cooked her favorite meals once in a while, hoping she might show up at the door one day. But deep down, I started realizing something painful. I might never get that chance. Maybe she would go on with her life, and I'd just become a faded memory, a story she tells others to explain why she's the way she is. The loneliness became unbearable. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My hair was grayer, my skin dull, my eyes tired from crying. The woman I used to be, the one full of hope and laughter, felt like someone else entirely. But beneath all the hurt, a quiet determination began to stir. If Arya truly believed the best gift would be the day I was gone, then maybe I could find a way to give her that gift in my own way. A final act of love that would speak louder than her anger ever could. When I realized what was coming, I decided Arya would get her gift, just not the one she expected. Arya thought she knew my life, but she never saw what I gave up for her. When you're a mother, people assume your sacrifices are natural, expected even. But nobody talks about how it feels when those sacrifices are forgotten, when everything you gave is treated like nothing. I wasn't always this tired, this quiet, this lonely woman living in a half-empty house. I used to have dreams, small ones, but they were mine. I wanted to study art. I used to paint by the lake near our old home, capturing sunsets and laughter on canvas. Then Dean came into my life, and love painted over everything. We were young, full of plans. He promised me we'd travel, that one day I'd have my own studio, and for a while, it seemed possible. Then Arya was born, and my world shifted. Suddenly, every dream I had became secondary to hers. I didn't mind, it felt natural, almost holy. When you hold your baby for the first time, every ambition you once had fades beside their heartbeat. You'd trade the world just to see them smile. But then Dean got sick. It started as a cough that wouldn't go away. Doctors said it was exhaustion, but by the time we knew the truth, it was too late. Cancer. I remember the night he told me he was sorry. Sorry for leaving me alone, sorry for making me carry the burden. I told him not to apologize, that love wasn't a burden, it was the only thing keeping us alive. When he passed away, something inside me went with him, but I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I had a 6-year-old girl who needed her mother more than ever. I sold my wedding ring to cover the first wave of medical bills. Then the car. Then the piano he had bought me. Piece by piece, I gave up everything that reminded me of who I was before. I started working double shifts at the diner. I'd wake up before dawn, pack Arya's lunch, and head out while she was still asleep. Some nights I came home so late I'd find her already in bed, clutching her teddy bear, waiting for me. I'd kiss her forehead and whisper promises I wasn't sure I could keep. There were nights when I'd skip meals just to make sure she had enough. Times when the lights nearly got shut off because I couldn't pay the bill on time. I remember one Christmas when all I could afford was a secondhand doll. I was terrified she'd hate it. But when she opened it, she squealed and hugged me, saying it was perfect. That was the last Christmas I remember her hugging me like that. Years later, when she started high school, I thought things would get better. She was bright, talented, beautiful, everything I'd hoped she'd become. But as her world grew bigger, mine grew smaller. Her friends came from wealthy families, and she started seeing our little home as something shameful. "Why can't we move somewhere nicer?" she'd ask. "Everyone else has bigger houses, better cars." I'd try to explain that love mattered more than money, but she'd roll her eyes. "Love doesn't pay bills, Mom," she said once, and that line cut deeper than she knew. I worked harder after that. Took on more shifts, hoping to give her what she wanted. Hoping she'd smile at me the way she used to. I told myself that if I just kept trying, she'd see how much I cared. But every time I managed to give her something new, she found something else to resent. When she turned 18 and went to college, I thought maybe distance would make her appreciate home. Instead, she barely called. The few times she did, it was about money. "I'll pay you back, Mom," she'd promise. But she never did, and I never asked her to. It wasn't about the money. It was about the silence, the growing space between her life and mine. I'd look at her photos online, Arya with her friends, smiling, shining, living the life I wanted her to have, and I'd feel proud and hollow all at once. She told people she came from humble beginnings, as if I were some distant mistake she'd outgrown. Once, I overheard her tell someone on the phone, "My mom's nice, but she's simple." Simple. I don't think she meant to be cruel, but those words stayed with me. I wasn't simple. I was exhausted, invisible, and doing everything I could to keep her world spinning. But I never told her that. I just smiled and said I was fine. Mothers do that, we hide the pain behind love until love starts to hurt. I kept telling myself she'd come back one day, that she'd see me, really see me, and realize what I had done for her. But years passed, and that moment never came. The last time we spoke before she told me I was better off gone, she accused me of holding her back, of guilt-tripping her into staying in touch. "You're too emotional, Mom," she said. "You make me feel bad all the time." After that, I stopped trying to explain myself. I started accepting that maybe she'd never understand. But deep down, I still hoped she would. Every mother does. We carry the belief that no matter how far they stray, our children will find their way back. But sometimes they don't, sometimes they keep walking until they can't even see you anymore. That realization was heavier than anything I'd carried before. I had built my entire life around being her mother, and now she didn't even want me in hers. It wasn't just my heart that broke that day, it was my identity. Everything I had sacrificed suddenly felt meaningless. I wasn't a hero or a martyr. I was just a woman who gave too much to someone who stopped looking back. I still remember sitting on the porch that night, watching the sky fade from gold to gray. I had nothing left but memories, and even those felt like ghosts. That was when it hit me. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for a love that wasn't coming. I had given Arya my youth, my strength, my joy, everything except the truth. And maybe, just maybe, it was time she finally knew what that truth looked like. The day she called me a burden, I realized my sacrifices had turned invisible. I wasn't just losing my daughter, I was losing my identity as her mother. The bond that once felt unbreakable had thinned to something fragile, almost invisible. Arya was 20 when she decided she needed space. That was the word she used, calm and emotionless, as if we were two acquaintances politely agreeing to part ways. She said she was moving in with her boyfriend, Tyler, and that I should learn to let go. I remember standing in the doorway with her suitcase between us, trying not to cry. I told her she'd always have a home here, that she could come back whenever she wanted. She nodded, hugged me quickly, and left. The sound of the car door shutting felt like the final page of a chapter I wasn't ready to end. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that she'd call every few days, maybe drop by for Sunday dinner. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The phone calls stopped, the messages became rare. When she did reach out, it was never to ask how I was, it was to ask for money. "It's just a loan," she'd say. "I'll pay you back." But she never did, and I never reminded her. I was just happy she called at all. I started writing her letters again, little notes full of warmth and motherly advice. "Eat well," I'd say. "Take care of yourself." Sometimes I'd slip in a small check or a handmade card, hoping she'd feel my love through the paper. But she never replied. I told myself she was busy, that maybe she'd thank me someday when she was older and wiser. I didn't want to believe what my heart already knew. She wasn't reading them. Then, one afternoon, I saw her face on social media smiling, glowing, surrounded by Tyler's wealthy family. They looked like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, champagne glasses. The caption under her photo read, "Grateful for my new family." My heart sank. I reread it again and again, hoping I had misunderstood. But no. That was my daughter, the one I'd raised alone, calling someone else her family. I couldn't stop myself. I called her, voice trembling. "I saw your post," I said. "You look beautiful. How have you been?" There was silence on the other end, followed by a sigh. "Mom, please don't make this a thing," she said flatly. "They're just people I spend time with. You don't have to read into everything." I wanted to ask her if she still considered me her family, but the lump in my throat was too heavy. She said she was busy and hung up. I sat there holding the phone long after the line went dead. A few months later, I decided to visit her. I told myself I just wanted to see her, to bring her a homemade pie like I used to. When I knocked on the door, she looked surprised, and not in a good way. "Mom, I should have called first." I smiled and told her it was a spontaneous visit. Behind her, I saw Tyler, a tall man with a sharp, smug expression. He didn't even greet me properly, just raised an eyebrow, as if I were a problem that needed solving. "We were about to head out," he said coldly. I handed Arya the pie, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "I thought you might like this," I said softly. She took it reluctantly and muttered something about being on a diet. Tyler wrapped his arm around her shoulder and said, "We'll see you another time, Mrs. Keller." Mrs. Keller, not Mom, not even Celine, just Mrs. Keller, like I was a stranger. The words stung more than I expected. On my way home, I couldn't stop crying. Every memory replayed in my mind: her first day of school, her tiny hand gripping mine, her laughter echoing through the halls. I'd raised her alone, given her everything, and now she couldn't even look at me with kindness. When did love become a nuisance? When did I become someone she was ashamed of? The following weeks were the hardest. I tried to stay busy, but everything reminded me of her. I'd pass her old room and pause at the doorway, staring at the dusty trophies and faded posters. It was like living inside a photograph of a life that no longer existed. Sometimes I'd still cook her favorite meals, chicken soup with too much garlic, just how she liked it, but the smell only made me lonelier. Then, one night, I got a call from her. My heart leapt, but her tone was cold. "Mom, I heard you're still living in the same house," she said. "It's too far from everything. You should sell it, maybe. Move somewhere smaller." I knew what she meant. Tyler had been eyeing my property for months. He saw it as a potential investment. "Don't worry about me," I said quietly. "This house has everything I need." There was a pause before she replied, "You're being stubborn again. It's not practical." I wanted to scream, to tell her this house held the last pieces of her childhood, of us, of who we used to be. But I didn't. I just said, "Good night, Arya." When I hung up, I realized something had shifted inside me. I was no longer the mother she wanted. I was the burden she tolerated. The next morning, I took out my journal and began to write again. Not letters this time, but memories. I wrote about her laughter, her tantrums, her little victories. I wrote because I was afraid that if I didn't, the memories would fade completely. And as I wrote, a quiet clarity began to form. Maybe this was what motherhood truly was, a slow, painful process of giving and losing, over and over, until all that's left is love and silence. For years, I had begged for her affection, convinced that if I just tried harder, she'd come back. But now I saw that love couldn't be forced. You can't make someone see your worth when they've already decided you're in their way. Still, I couldn't stop loving her. Even if she saw me as nothing more than a reminder of a life she wanted to forget, she was still my daughter. And no matter how much she hurt me, that love refused to die. That night, I made a promise to myself. If Arya didn't want me in her life, I would step back. I would give her the space she wanted, the distance she thought she needed. But I also knew one thing for certain: I wasn't done yet. She might have turned her back on me, but I still had something left to give her. Something that would outlast the anger, the silence, and the years between us. I decided to give her the distance she wanted and something she'd never forget. It started with fatigue, then the doctor's face told me the rest. I had always been healthy, at least on the outside. Sure, I'd get tired from the long days and sleepless nights, but what mother doesn't? So when I began waking up feeling dizzy, weak, and short of breath, I told myself it was stress. I thought maybe the loneliness was just catching up to me. I ignored the warning signs, pushed through the exhaustion, and told everyone I was fine. But my body knew the truth long before my mind was ready to accept it. One morning, I fainted in the kitchen. The room spun, my vision went white, and I woke up on the cold tile with my heart pounding like a drum. My friend June was the one who found me. She'd stopped by to drop off groceries, and when she saw me on the floor, she panicked. "Celine, you need to see a doctor," she insisted, voice trembling. I tried to laugh it off, but she wasn't having it. She drove me straight to the clinic, her hands gripping the steering wheel like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. At the clinic, everything happened: fast blood tests, scans, Hushed conversations. The doctor, a kind older man named Dr. Patel, asked me to sit down. His voice was soft, too soft. I knew before he said it that something was terribly wrong. "Celine," he began, "I'm afraid the tests show signs of ovarian cancer. It's advanced." The word advanced hit me like ice water. I stared at him, trying to process the sound, the shape, the weight of it. Cancer. Late stage. My ears rang. The world seemed to shrink into that tiny sterile room. He talked about treatment options, chemotherapy, radiation, but I could barely hear him. All I could think about was Arya. My daughter. The one who wanted me gone. The one who might never know how much I loved her. I remember nodding, pretending to listen, while a part of me quietly accepted what he wasn't saying out loud. I didn't have much time left. When I got home, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the framed photos on the wall. There was one of Arya as a little girl, missing a front tooth, holding a melted ice cream cone. She looked so happy, so innocent. I traced her face with my fingers and whispered, "I'm sorry. Sorry for getting sick. Sorry for not being the mother she needed. Sorry for everything that had gone wrong between us." I didn't tell Arya about the diagnosis. She barely answered my calls anymore, and I couldn't bring myself to leave her a message like that. I couldn't bear the thought of hearing her voice sound indifferent, or worse, annoyed. So I told no one except June. She came over every day after that, helping with meals and chores, though she never said out loud what we both knew. I was fading. The nights became the hardest. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my body aching, my mind running through every what if imaginable. What if I had been a better mother? What if I had been stronger, more patient? Would Arya have stayed close? Would she love me enough to care now? I tried to pray, but the words came out broken. The only thing that brought me comfort was writing. I went back to my journal, the one where I'd poured my heart out for years, and began writing again. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't writing to ease my pain anymore. I was writing to leave something behind. Memories. Lessons. Truths I had been too afraid to speak. I wanted Arya to know everything I couldn't say while I was alive. The stories of her childhood, the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd buried so she could chase hers. June found me writing one night and asked what I was doing. "I'm just putting things in order," I said. She gave me a look, the kind only an old friend can give one that mixes concern with quiet understanding. "If you're planning something, make sure it's what you really want," she said. I smiled weakly. "It's not a plan, June. It's a goodbye." It was more than that. It was a promise. I refused to let my life end as a story of bitterness and regret. If Arya thought my death would be a gift, I'd make sure it was, but not in the way she expected. My love for her wasn't something cancer could destroy. It had lived through pain, disappointment, and silence. It could live through this too. Over the next few weeks, I began organizing my life as if it were a puzzle I finally understood. I gathered old letters, photos, recordings, and mementos, pieces of our shared history that told the story of who we once were. Every item had a memory attached, and each one hurt to touch, but I forced myself to keep going. I wrote a letter to my lawyer, asking him to meet me soon. Not to discuss money, but something far more personal. I also started writing instructions for June: what to do, where to look, how to make sure Arya got everything I left behind. I didn't know how much time I had left. But I knew one thing with certainty. My story wasn't going to end quietly. As I sealed another envelope, I caught my reflection in the window. My face looked older, paler, but there was something else there too: resolve. I had spent my entire life giving, sacrificing, waiting. Now, I had one last chance to make sure all of it meant something. I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, "This isn't the end, not yet." That's when the idea for my final gift began to form. If words had driven us apart, maybe words could bring her back. That thought came to me one sleepless night as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-empty cup of tea gone cold. My hands trembled as I turned the pages of my journal, rereading the ink-stained fragments of my life. Every word I had written was soaked with love and regret. I realized then that my story wasn't over, not yet. Maybe I couldn't heal things while I was alive. But perhaps my words could do it when I was gone. That's how the project began. It wasn't about money or inheritance. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about truth, the kind that lives in the quiet spaces between a mother and her child. I started documenting everything, from the day Arya was born to the last time she spoke to me without anger. I wanted her to understand the woman I truly was, not the one she imagined me to be. Each morning, after I took my medicine, I sat by the window with my recorder and spoke softly into it. Sometimes, I'd tell her stories about her first steps, her favorite bedtime songs, the day she learned to ride a bike, and I pretended not to cry when she fell. Other times, I'd speak about the darker moments, the nights I stayed up counting bills, the fear that she'd hate me for not giving her enough, the quiet pride I felt watching her grow strong even when she didn't look back. My voice would shake, but I kept going. I needed her to hear me one last time, without anger or interruption. I also began sorting through old boxes stored in the attic. Inside were photos, love letters from Dean, Arya's baby clothes, and her kindergarten drawings. Each one told a story of love, messy, imperfect, but real. I wanted her to see that her life was built on something pure, even if she couldn't see it now. I packed each item carefully, labeling everything with small notes written in my handwriting. For the days you need to remember love, for when you feel alone, for when you finally forgive me. June started coming over more often, helping me when my body felt too weak to stand. At first, she didn't understand what I was doing. "Celine, you should be resting," she said, watching me struggle to pack another box. "You don't need to do all this." But I shook my head. "I do," I told her. "This is the only way I know to stay alive after I'm gone." She looked at me quietly for a moment, then nodded. "Then let me help." Together, we spent evenings recording, labeling, and writing. She became my anchor, my witness. We laughed sometimes, even through the sadness. I'd tell her about Arya's mischievous childhood moments, how she once covered the living room wall in crayons and proudly called it art. June would smile and say, "She sounds like you." I hadn't thought of it that way before. Maybe Arya had a piece of me inside her, one she couldn't see yet. As the project grew, I realized it was becoming something more than just recordings and keepsakes. It was a message, a final letter to my daughter written across hundreds of small, honest moments. So, I found an old wooden chest in the attic. It was Dean's, from his college days, worn but strong. I polished it, lined it with velvet, and began filling it with everything I'd created: the tapes, the journals, the letters, the photos, the trinkets of our shared life. This chest would be my final gift to her. Each night, after June left, I'd sit by the chest and whisper into the darkness. "One day, you'll understand, Arya," I'd say. "And when you do, I hope you'll see that love never left you, it was here, waiting." I recorded one final message for her to find at the very end. My voice was weaker that night, but I spoke clearly, knowing it might be the last time I could. "Arya," I said, "I know you're angry with me. I know I wasn't perfect, but I loved you every single day of your life. I still do. You may not think you need me now. But one day, when the noise fades, you'll hear my voice again, and maybe then, you'll remember that you were never unloved." I sealed that recording in an envelope marked "Play Last." The next day, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Briggs, and gave him detailed instructions about my estate. "There's a chest," I told him, "and it's not to be opened until after my passing. My friend June will make sure it reaches my daughter." He gave me a long, curious look but agreed. I could tell he wanted to ask why, but I didn't owe him an explanation. Some things were too sacred to explain. When I came home, I felt a strange sense of peace. My pain hadn't gone away, but my heart felt lighter, steadier. For the first time in years, I had purpose again. I was no longer just waiting for the end, I was building something that would outlive me. For weeks, I kept adding to the chest, one item at a time. I even included small things like her favorite cookie recipe, my wedding ring, and the book I used to read to her before bed. I wanted her to open it and feel like she was sitting beside me again, if only for a little while. Then, one evening as I was finishing a recording, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my heart almost stopped. There she was, Arya, my daughter, standing in the doorway, looking different. Older. Harder. She didn't smile. Her eyes scanned me like she was assessing a stranger. My first instinct was to hug her, but something in her posture told me not to. My voice trembled as I said her name. "Mom," she said flatly. "Can I come in?" My heart raced. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe this was it, that she'd come to make peace. But deep down, I could sense something else behind her visit. But before that day came, something unexpected happened. Arya showed up. When I opened the door, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Arya stood there, perfectly still, her face pale and unreadable. It had been over a year since I'd last seen her in person, but she looked like a stranger. Her hair was sleek and polished, her clothes expensive, her eyes sharp and distant. I could smell her perfume before she even stepped inside, a cold floral scent that filled the space between us like a barrier. For a moment, I just stared, my breath caught in my throat. Then, forcing a smile, I whispered, "Arya, you're here." She stepped past me without hugging or even making eye contact. "Yeah," she said curtly, setting her designer purse on the table. "I heard you weren't doing well. June told me you've been sick." Her tone was flat, almost businesslike. The words stung. I had imagined this moment so many times, her running into my arms, crying, apologizing. But there were no tears, no warmth, just obligation. "Yes," I said softly. "I've been tired lately." I gestured toward the couch. "Sit down, sweetheart. I'll make us some tea." She sighed, glancing around the house like she was appraising it. "It looks smaller than I remember," she murmured. Her voice carried that subtle edge of judgment she never used to have. I tried to ignore it and focused on the kettle, my hands shaking slightly as I poured the water. When I turned back to her, she was scrolling through her phone, looking bored. "How's Tyler?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "He's fine," she said without looking up. "We're doing well. We just moved into a new place closer to his parents." "His parents must be happy to have you nearby," I said, forcing a smile. "They are," she replied, finally glancing at me. "They've been helping us a lot. They're like family." Family. The word hit me like a stone. I nodded, swallowing hard, and placed her tea on the table. "That's good. Everyone needs family." She stared at the cup, then at me. "Mom," she began slowly, "have you thought about what's going to happen with the house?" The question caught me off guard. "The house?" I repeated. "Yeah. I mean, you're not... Well, it's probably time to start planning things. Tyler and I could help you with that," she said, her tone suddenly brighter, almost rehearsed. "We've been talking about, maybe, managing things for you. You know, making sure it doesn't go to waste." I set my cup down carefully, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. "I see," I said quietly. "You're worried about the house." She shrugged. "Well, someone has to. Be practical. I mean, it's not like you can keep up with it forever." I wanted to scream. "You haven't even asked how I'm feeling." But I didn't. I just nodded and smiled faintly. "Everything will be taken care of." Her eyes flickered, curious. "What do you mean?" "I've made arrangements," I said simply. "You don't have to concern yourself." For a brief moment, I thought I saw something in her expression, confusion, maybe even guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She leaned back and crossed her legs, her bracelets jingling softly. "Good. I just want you to be comfortable, Mom." We sat in silence for a while, the ticking of the clock filling the room. I looked at her hands perfectly manicured, resting on her lap, and remembered those same hands covered in paint when she was little, waving a brush proudly as she showed me her drawings. I wondered if she remembered those moments too, or if they had been erased by time and pride. "Do you need anything else?" she asked suddenly, glancing at her phone again. I can't stay long. Tyler's waiting. I nodded slowly, trying not to show how much that hurt. No, I'll be fine. She stood, brushing off invisible dust from her skirt. Okay, well, take care of yourself, all right? I rose too, fighting back tears. Aria, I said softly, before you go, I just want you to know I love you. She hesitated for a second, her hand on the doorknob. I know, she said flatly. Take care. Then she walked out, the door closing behind her with a quiet click that felt louder than thunder. The house fell silent again. I sank onto the couch, the tea still untouched. My chest ached, but not from illness, it was from the weight of love that had nowhere left to go. I thought of her words, her tone, the way she looked at the house instead of me. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. You can't hate someone you've loved that deeply. You just ache. Later that night, June stopped by. She found me sitting in the dark, the only light coming from the lamp beside the chest. She came, I said quietly. June's face softened. And? I shook my head, forcing a small smile. She looked beautiful. June sat beside me, squeezing my hand. Celine, you don't have to pretend. I turned to her, my eyes wet. She wasn't here for me, June. She was here for what's left of me. We sat in silence for a long time. June didn't speak, and I didn't need her to. She knew. She'd seen enough of life to understand that sometimes, the people we love the most become strangers long before they leave us. When she left, I sat alone for hours, staring at the chest, the one holding all my recordings, my letters, my heart. Until that day, I had planned to leave it simple, quiet, a box of memories for Aria to find after I was gone. But now, I realized that wasn't enough. I needed to know what kind of person my daughter had truly become. Was there any love left inside her, buried beneath the pride and distance? That night, I tore open my will and began rewriting it. My pen moved with a trembling but determined hand. If she wanted to inherit what I'd built, she would have to prove something first, not to me, but to herself. I would leave her a choice, one that would show me whether my love had truly been wasted. That night, I decided my plan needed one final touch, a test of her heart. If she wanted my things more than my love, she was about to find out what that meant. That thought anchored me through the days that followed. My encounter with Aria had left a hollow ache in my chest, but also a strange clarity. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was done begging for her affection. I was done letting her walk through my heart as if it were a floor mat. If she wanted my house, my belongings, my assets, then she would have to earn them not through greed, but through compassion. It was the test I decided to leave behind. The next morning, I called Mr. Briggs, my lawyer, and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of me, my will already open. You've made changes, he said, adjusting his glasses. I have, I replied. I need to include a condition. A choice my daughter will have to make when I'm gone. He gave me a cautious look. A condition? That can be arranged. But may I ask what kind? I took a deep breath. It's simple, I said. If my daughter comes for what I've left behind only for money or property, she gets nothing. But if she shows compassion, if she takes the time to understand what I've truly left for her, then everything becomes hers. Mr. Briggs frowned slightly. That's an unusual clause. I know, I said softly. But my life has been unusual too. We worked on the paperwork together for hours. I detailed everything, the house, the savings account, the small jewelry collection, and, of course, the chest. I told him that June would hold the key and the instructions. Aria would receive a letter upon my passing, one that would tell her where to find the chest, but the rest would depend on her. By the time we finished, the afternoon light had turned golden, spilling through the window and warming my trembling hands. When Mr. Briggs left, he paused at the door and said gently, "You're a remarkable woman, Celine." I smiled faintly. "No, Mr. Briggs. Just a mother trying to be heard one last time." That night, I recorded a new message for Aria. My voice was weaker than before, but my resolve was steady. "Aria," I said. When you find this, I'll probably be gone. You may think this is all about money, but it isn't. It's about love, the kind that never asks for anything back. Everything I leave behind will mean nothing if you don't understand why I left it. But if you open your heart, if you take the time to listen, then maybe, just maybe, you'll see that every sacrifice I made was my way of loving you. After the recording, I sat quietly, staring at the flickering candle on the table. The house felt still, almost reverent. I imagined her sitting in this same kitchen someday, listening to my voice echo from a speaker, realizing I was speaking only to her. The following days blurred together. My health was failing faster now. Some mornings I couldn't even make it out of bed. June came by daily, bringing soup and checking my medications. She was gentle but firm, reminding me to rest. But I had work left to do. I wrote 2 letters, identical envelopes but very different contents. One was addressed, for my daughter, if she chooses compassion, and the other, for my daughter, if she chooses indifference. In the first letter, I wrote about forgiveness, love, and hope. I told her that I believed she still had goodness in her, that she could use what I left to help others, to make the world kinder than it had been to us. I left her the entirety of my estate, every penny, every possession, with the condition that she use part of it to start something meaningful, something that gave back. In the second letter, I wrote a single line: if love means nothing to you, then nothing is what you inherit. I sealed both envelopes and handed them to June with trembling hands. Promise me, I said, you'll know which one to give her. June's eyes glistened. I will, Celine, I promise. That night, I felt the pain more intensely than ever. My body was tired, my breaths shallow, but my mind was strangely at peace. I looked around my home, the photographs, the furniture, the fading flowers on the table, and felt no regret. I had lived a life full of love, even if much of it had been unreturned. And now, I was ready to let go. A few days later, Arya came to visit again. The visit was shorter this time, colder. She stood by the doorway, arms crossed. How are you feeling? She asked, her tone detached. I've been better, I replied with a weak smile. She nodded absently, glancing at the clock. I can't stay long, Mom. Tyler's waiting. I reached out, my hand trembling, and gently touched her arm. I just want you to know, sweetheart, I love you. She exhaled, uncomfortable. I know, she said quickly. You don't have to say it every time. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, something soft, uncertain, but then it was gone. She turned and left, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air long after she'd gone. That night, as the house fell silent again, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. My body ached with weakness, but my mind was clear. I thought about the chest, the letters, the recordings, the test. It wasn't revenge I was leaving her, it was truth. The kind of truth that can either heal or haunt, depending on how it's received. As dawn began to lighten the room, I whispered into the quiet, I've done all I can. My eyelids grew heavy, my breathing shallow. I reached for the photo on my nightstand, Arya as a little girl, smiling with ice cream smeared on her face. My thumb traced her cheek one last time. Then, I let the world fade. The next morning, I collapsed on the kitchen floor. I didn't feel fear, only peace. When my body finally gave out, it wasn't as dramatic as I imagined death would be. There were no flashing lights or loud sounds, just quiet. I remember the way the morning sun spilled through the curtains, golden and soft, warming my face as everything else faded. My legs had gone weak when I tried to stand. And before I knew it, I was on the floor, my hand reaching toward the counter as the world slipped into silence. I wasn't scared. For the first time in years, I felt calm. It was as if all the noise, the pain, the worry, the heartbreak had finally gone still. When June found me, she screamed my name, shaking me as if she could pull me back. But I was already far away, floating somewhere between memory and light. I could still see her, though her trembling hands, the tears streaming down her cheeks, the way she called for help even when she knew it was too late. The paramedics arrived, voices echoing in the background, but none of it felt real. I was still in my home, but not of it anymore. There's something strange about dying. You don't stop caring. You just start seeing things differently. As I watched them carry my body away, I thought not of myself, but of Arya. I wondered if she'd cry. I wondered if she'd even come. I wanted to believe she would, even if only to make sure she got what she wanted. That thought should have made me bitter, but instead, it filled me with an odd kind of grace. Because deep down, I knew what I had left behind would change everything. June took care of everything, just as I'd asked. She contacted Mr. Briggs and arranged the funeral. She made sure the chest was safely stored in her home, waiting for the right time. She even chose my favorite flowers for the service, white lilies and soft pink roses. I watched it all from a distance, weightless, unseen, yet present. There's something hauntingly beautiful about seeing the world move without you. The day of my funeral was bright, uncomfortably so. People from the diner came, a few neighbors, and even some old friends. I noticed who cried and who didn't. I noticed Arya, too. She stood at the back, wearing a black dress that looked too expensive for grief. Her expression was blank, her lips pressed tight. If I hadn't known her so well, I might have thought she was composed, but I could see the flicker of something beneath the surface. Guilt, maybe. Or confusion. After the service, she spoke briefly with June and Mr. Briggs. I listened to their conversation, hovering in that strange stillness that exists between worlds. Mr. Briggs explained that my will had special instructions. Arya's inheritance wasn't immediate. She would receive a letter, and only after reading it could she claim what was left to her. Her brows furrowed. "A letter?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "Yes," Mr. Briggs replied calmly. "It contains everything you need to know." Arya crossed her arms. "And what about her belongings? The house? Her accounts, what happens to those?" June glanced at her, her voice soft but firm. "Everything is part of the process, Arya. You'll understand soon enough." Arya sighed, impatient. "This is ridiculous. My mother was never complicated. She didn't need to make things dramatic. If only she knew how much effort I'd spent trying to not be dramatic. But grief has a way of exposing what's hidden." I watched as June handed her the sealed envelope, the one marked "to my daughter." Arya held it gingerly, like it might burn her fingers. "Is this it?" she asked. "For now," June said. "There's more when you're ready." Arya didn't reply. She just tucked the letter into her bag and left. No goodbyes, no tears. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that this was only the beginning, that inside that envelope was the truth she'd been running from, but all I could do was watch. That evening, as the mourners left and the sun began to set, June stayed behind. She stood at my grave, her hands clasped, eyes red from crying. "You did it, Celine," she whispered. "It's all in motion now. She'll see, she'll finally see." And she was right, because what waited inside that chest wasn't just a collection of objects, it was a map, a story, a mirror held up to Arya's heart. I had left her a choice: to walk away unchanged, or to finally confront the woman she thought she despised. Later that night, I followed her in silence as she returned home. I watched her throw her purse on the couch, sigh, and pull out the envelope. She sat for a long time before opening it. I could almost hear her heartbeat, steady and conflicted. Finally, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Inside, in my neat handwriting, were just a few lines. "My dearest Arya, if you're reading this, it means my time has come. I know we've drifted apart, but I never stopped loving you. Everything I owned, everything I am, now lives in one place, a wooden chest waiting for you. Inside it, you'll find the story of us. But before you open it, take a moment to ask yourself what you truly want. If you're looking for money, you'll find disappointment. But if you're looking for truth, you might finally find peace. Mom." Arya stared at the letter for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she looked around her apartment filled with luxury but empty of warmth, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. She folded the letter, set it down, and whispered to herself, "What did you do, Mom?" I smiled from somewhere beyond the light. because she was finally asking the right question. She didn't realize the chest contained the one thing she'd been missing all along me. She opened it expecting money, but found my voice instead. When June delivered the wooden chest to Arya a week after my funeral, I could almost feel her hesitation from wherever I was. The chest wasn't large, but it carried weight, emotional, invisible, undeniable. June said Arya stood by the door for several minutes before letting her in. "It's from your mother," June told her softly. "She wanted you to have it now." Arya frowned. "What is it?" June gave a faint, knowing smile. "You'll find out." Arya didn't invite her to stay. The moment the door closed, she stared at the chest like it was a ghost. It was old, worn smooth from time, the brass hinges glinting faintly in the afternoon light. Her fingers brushed against the lock, and for a moment, she froze. Then she reached for the small envelope taped to the lid, one word written in my handwriting: "Begin." Inside the envelope was a note: "Start here. Listen, before you judge." She sighed, rolling her eyes at first, but curiosity got the better of her. She opened the chest and found the first cassette tape, labeled simply Arya, age 1. There was an old portable recorder sitting beside it, along with a stack of letters and photographs. For a moment, she just stared, unsure what to do. Then, reluctantly, she pressed play. My voice filled the room, soft, wavering, alive. "Hello, my little star," I began. "You're only 1 year old as I record this, sleeping beside me. I just wanted to remember the sound of your laughter, the way your tiny hand wraps around my finger like I'm your whole world. You don't know it yet, but you saved me." At first, Arya laughed a dry, nervous sound. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You actually recorded yourself." But as the tape played, her laughter faded. My words weren't sentimental, they were real. They told of long nights, struggles, hopes, and joy. Every pause carried love. By the second recording, labeled "First Day of School," her shoulders had slumped. She listened to me describe how proud I was, how I cried in the car after dropping her off because the house felt too quiet without her voice. "You ran out to the gate after school," I said in the recording, and shouted, "Mommy, I missed you. I hope someday you'll still say that." Tears began to roll down her cheeks. She wiped them away angrily, as if embarrassed. "This doesn't change anything," she muttered. But still, she pressed play on the next one. The chest wasn't filled with money or jewelry. It was filled with pieces of a life she'd forgotten existed. Old drawings, her first baby shoes, a dried flower she'd picked for me when she was 5, and a worn-out teddy bear with one eye missing. Each item was tagged with a handwritten note: "You gave me this flower and said it would never die because love keeps it alive. This was your favorite bear, you used to say he protected you at night." Arya sat on the floor, surrounded by these relics, her polished nails trembling as she picked them up one by one. The room around her, the expensive furniture, the designer decor suddenly felt hollow. These old, imperfect things held more meaning than anything she owned. Then she found my journals. Thick, worn notebooks tied with a ribbon. The first page began with a simple line: "For my daughter, when I'm no longer there to tell you myself." Arya hesitated before reading. When she did, the words hit her like a storm. I wrote about the nights I cried in silence so she wouldn't hear. About the sacrifices I made, the jobs I worked, the meals I skipped. About the times she said cruel things, and I forgave her anyway. But I didn't write it to make her feel guilty. I wrote it so she'd finally understand that love is not about perfection, it's about persistence. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon. She sat surrounded by memories, her face wet, her breathing uneven. She whispered to herself, "Why didn't you tell me all this when you were alive?" But she knew the answer. She had never listened. She reached for another tape. Arya, age 16. That was the year she had pulled away from me. My voice on the tape was sad but steady. "You're a teenager now," I said softly. "You think I don't understand you, but I do. You want to be free, to be strong. I want that for you too. But please remember, independence doesn't mean forgetting where you came from." She covered her mouth, choking on a sob. Stop, she whispered to the recorder, as if she could make my voice go silent. But she didn't stop. She let it play until the end. The tapes became a symphony of love and loss, of laughter and tears. My voice, once a sound she'd grown to resent, now became the only thing she wanted to hear. The chest wasn't just a container. It was a mirror showing her who she used to be and who she'd lost along the way. By midnight, she was still listening. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess, her heart unraveling. Then she found a small sealed envelope at the bottom of the chest, labeled Final Tape. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a cassette labeled The Truth. For a long moment, she just stared at it, afraid of what it might hold. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed it in the recorder and pressed play. My voice came through softer than before, fragile, almost whispering. "Arya," I said, "if you've made it this far, I know you've begun to understand. There's one last story you need to hear. It's not an easy one, but it's the truth I couldn't tell you while I was alive." Arya froze, her eyes wide. She could hear the change in my tone. The warmth was still there, but beneath it lay something deeper, an ache she didn't recognize yet. Her heartbeat quickened as I took a long pause on the tape. "Before you judge me," I said softly, "know that everything I did for you." Arya's lips trembled. She pressed her hand against the recorder, as if trying to hold on to my voice. When she reached the final tape, her entire world changed. This was the secret I never told her, the truth behind her father's death. When Arya pressed play, my voice came through slower this time, each breath deliberate, as though I'd known she would be holding on to every word. The tape began with silence, 5 long seconds of it before I finally spoke. "Arya," I whispered, "you've listened to so many of my memories now, and you've heard how much I loved you. But there's something I never told you, not because I wanted to keep it from you, but because I wanted to protect you from a truth that hurt too much to say out loud." She sat back on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, her chest tight. The sound of my voice filled the quiet apartment, fragile but alive. "Your father didn't just die from illness," I continued softly. "The doctors said it was his heart, but what they didn't tell you, what I didn't tell you, was that it was exhaustion. He was working 3 jobs to save enough money for your college. He was so tired, Arya. He would come home, smile for you, and collapse beside me on the couch. I begged him to rest, but he wouldn't listen. He said, 'I can rest when she's taken care of.' He pushed himself until his body gave out." Arya's breath hitched. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not true, you said," I continued, calm and honest. "I said he got sick, because that was easier than telling you the truth that love can kill too. When it carries too much weight. He didn't die from weakness, my darling. He died from devotion." She pressed her hand to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Her father had always been a gentle, distant memory, someone she thought of fondly but vaguely. Now, that memory felt like an open wound. "And there's something else," my voice went on. "Before your father died, he made me promise something. He had a small savings account, nothing big, but it was everything he'd managed to put aside for you. He made me promise not to use it for bills, not to touch it for myself, no matter how hard things got. He said, 'When she's grown, give this to her so she can have the life we dreamed of for her.'" Arya frowned, confused. "Savings," she whispered to herself. "What savings?" "That money still exists," I said on the tape. "I protected it all these years, even when I had nothing left. Every time I wanted to give up. You didn't know it, but I was holding on for both of us." Arya stood up suddenly, pacing the room. "You kept it?" she said under her breath, almost angry, but the anger wasn't for me. It was for herself. "All those years I thought you were broke, that you couldn't handle things." She stopped mid-sentence, realizing how many cruel things she'd said to me about money, about responsibility, about my so-called failures. The tape went on. "You once asked me why I never remarried. The truth is, I couldn't. No one else could understand what it meant to lose your father and still find a reason to keep living. You were my reason, Arya. Even when you didn't want me, I still wanted you. That never changed." By now, Arya was sobbing openly, her body trembling. She clutched the recorder like it was something holy. My voice on the tape began to waver, growing softer, more fragile, like it was fading into memory. "I know you've been angry with me," I said. "I know you've hated me for things you didn't understand. But I forgive you. I forgave you the moment you said those cruel words, the ones that broke me. Because love, real love, doesn't stop when it hurts. It keeps going, even when it's quiet, even when it's unseen." Arya pressed her forehead to her knees, her tears falling onto the wooden floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry, Mom." "I want you to forgive yourself," my voice said next. "Don't let guilt become the ghost that haunts you. If you've made it to this part of the story, it means you're ready to see what love really looks like. It's sacrifice, it's patience. It's doing what's right, even when no one thanks you for it." She looked around the apartment, the designer furniture, the spotless floors, the lifeless perfection, and felt a wave of emptiness wash over her. All the things she'd chased suddenly looked meaningless. "There's one more thing," my voice whispered. "Inside the chest, there's an envelope marked for when you're ready. Don't open it until your heart tells you it's time." The tape clicked softly, then ended. Arya sat still for a long moment, the sound of silence pressing in on her. Then, slowly, she reached into the chest and found the final envelope. The handwriting on the front was shaky but clear. "For when you're ready." Her hands trembled as she held it. She wanted to rip it open immediately, but something stopped her. Maybe it was my voice still echoing in her head, or maybe it was the guilt sitting heavy in her chest. She set the envelope on the table and just stared at it, tears still falling silently down her cheeks. That night, she didn't sleep. She kept replaying the tapes, my voice wrapping around her like a ghostly lullaby. Every word peeled back another layer of her anger, revealing the love she'd buried beneath resentment. By dawn, her eyes were swollen, her heart raw, but for the first time in years, she felt close to me. When the morning light spilled through the window, she finally whispered, "I miss you, Mom." She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of her transformation. Then she found the last sealed envelope marked for when you're ready. She thought it was another goodbye. It wasn't. The sun had barely risen when Arya finally gathered the courage to open the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she slid her nail under the seal, unfolding the delicate paper that smelled faintly of lavender, my favorite scent. She hesitated for a moment, holding her breath, then began to read. "My dearest Arya, if you've reached this point, it means you've listened, you've cried, you've felt things you've been running from for a long time, and now, you're ready to understand. I've left you everything, but not for the reasons you think. The money, the house, the things they mean nothing on their own. What I'm leaving you is a responsibility, a chance to turn pain into purpose. My last wish is simple. Use what I've left to help others who have lived the kind of life I did, mothers who give everything and are left with nothing." Arya paused, tears blurring her vision. She pressed her hand over her mouth, letting out a trembling sigh. "You once told me I made you feel guilty for having a better life. That was never my intention. I only wanted you to remember where you came from. I wanted you to know that you can rise without forgetting who lifted you first. You are capable of great love, Arya. I know it's still in you. Use what I leave behind to start something beautiful. Help women who feel unseen. Help daughters who've lost their way. And if you do that, everything I own will be yours to keep. But if you can't, if you refuse to see the value in this, then it all goes to charity. And that's all right too. Because then, at least, it will still help someone." By the time she reached the end, Arya's tears had soaked the page. She read the closing lines over and over again, as if she needed to memorize them. "No matter what you choose, I will always be proud of you. I love you beyond words, beyond mistakes, beyond time. Mom." Arya folded the letter gently, pressing it to her chest. She sat there in silence, her mind racing, her heart unraveling. For years, she had believed she was the victim, the one who'd grown up misunderstood. Now she saw that she had been blind to the love that had carried her all along. The days that followed were quiet. She stopped answering Tyler's calls. She stopped posting pictures online. She spent hours rereading my letters, touching the keepsakes in the chest, listening to the tapes again. Every word chipped away at the wall she'd built around herself. Then one evening, she called June. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice unsteady. June agreed immediately. They met at the little diner where I used to work, the same one that smelled of coffee and burnt toast. The same one that had helped me keep food on the table for Arya when she was small. When Arya walked in, she froze. Everything looked so different from her world now. Simple, modest, honest. June smiled when she saw her. "You look just like your mother," she said. Arya's eyes filled with tears. "I used to hate when people said that," she admitted softly. "Now it feels like the biggest compliment I could ever get." They sat for hours. June told her stories I'd never had the chance to, the nights I'd stayed past closing just to earn an extra tip. The way I'd bragged about Arya to anyone who would listen. "She's my miracle," June quoted me as saying. "My reason." Arya covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I didn't deserve her," she whispered. June reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You were her whole world, even when you didn't see it." After that day, something shifted inside Arya. She began visiting places from her childhood, the park where we used to feed ducks, the library where I taught her to read, the lake where we'd sit together watching sunsets. Each place felt haunted, yet healing. She would close her eyes and whisper, "I remember, Mom. I remember everything now." Weeks passed, and the weight in her chest started to feel like purpose instead of punishment. She began thinking about my last wish, the idea of helping others. She researched local shelters and charities, speaking to women who reminded her of me. Tired, kind, unseen. Every story she heard made her understand more deeply what I had carried all those years. One night, she found herself standing outside my house, the one she had once called small and embarrassing. It was dark and quiet now, but it still smelled faintly of roses and lemon polish. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence welcomed her like an old friend. She walked through each room, touching the furniture, tracing the marks on the walls where her childhood had lived. In the kitchen, she found the old teacup I used to drink from, cracked but still standing. She picked it up and smiled through her tears. "You never threw anything away," she whispered. "You always said everything had meaning." That night, she sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd written so many letters to her, and she made a decision. She would fulfill my last wish. The next morning, she called June again. "I'm going to do it," she said. "Do what, sweetheart?" "Start something in her name," Arya replied. "Something that helps mothers like her, like us." June's voice broke with emotion. She'd be so proud. Arya nodded, her voice trembling. "I just hope it's not too late to be proud of me too." For the first time in years, she felt peace. Not because she had made amends completely, but because she finally understood the language of love I had spoken all my life, the quiet kind, the selfless kind. And for the first time in years, she whispered, "I miss you, Mom." The real gift wasn't what I left behind, it was what she found within herself. After reading my letter and realizing the truth of everything I had carried, Arya's world began to change in quiet, irreversible ways. The expensive apartment that once made her proud now felt cold, almost sterile. She started spending less time with Tyler, whose words suddenly sounded hollow next to the echoes of mine. Whenever he called to complain that she was dwelling on the past, she simply hung up. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to justify her feelings. She was done trying to be who others wanted her to be. It started small. She packed up half of her closet, all the clothes she'd bought to impress people she barely liked, and donated them to a women's shelter downtown. When she arrived, she met a young mother sitting outside with 2 children wrapped in old blankets. The woman smiled shyly, thanking her for the clothes. Something inside Arya broke and mended all at once. "What's your name?" she asked. The woman said, "Danielle." That night, Arya couldn't stop thinking about Danielle and her children. She imagined me, years ago, struggling in the same way, hungry, scared, determined to hold everything together. For the first time, she truly saw me, Not as the mother she resented, but as a woman who had fought every day just to keep love alive. That was when she decided to honor my last wish. She sold her luxury car and used the money as seed funding to start a non-profit organization in my name. She called it the Celine Foundation, a space dedicated to supporting single mothers through financial aid, education, and emotional support. She poured all her energy into it, working late nights, contacting local businesses, speaking to volunteers. At first, people didn't take her seriously, but she didn't stop. The same stubbornness that once pushed her away from me was now the force driving her towards something beautiful. June helped her with the paperwork, and together they transformed the old diner where I used to work into the foundation's first office. Aria laughed the first time she walked inside after years of absence. "It still smells like burnt coffee," she said softly. June smiled and replied, "Some things never change." As the weeks passed, more women came through the doors, mothers with tired eyes and hopeful smiles. Aria listened to their stories, their heartbreaks, their triumphs. Every woman reminded her of a different version of me, the younger one still full of hope, the middle-aged one struggling to make ends meet, the older one who never stopped believing love could heal. She began sharing my story with them, carefully, respectfully, never as a tale of pity but as one of resilience. "My mother raised me alone," she would tell them. "She didn't have much, but she had love, and that was enough to keep us alive." Some of the women cried. Some hugged her. One said, "You talk about her like she's still here." Aria smiled and whispered, "She is." In her free time, Aria started writing. Not letters of apology, she knew those belonged to the past, but reflections. Small journal entries about the lessons she'd learned from grief and forgiveness. She began posting them anonymously on a blog called The Gift You Left Behind. People started reading, sharing, connecting. The stories resonated with strangers who had complicated relationships with their parents, people who'd lost someone before making things right. Aria found comfort in knowing she wasn't alone. As months passed, the foundation grew. Donations started coming in. Local news outlets featured her story. Reporters wanted to know what inspired her. She never mentioned the fight, the cruel words, or her guilt. Instead, she said, "Everything I have now was built on my mother's love." One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Aria visited my grave for the first time since the funeral. She brought fresh white lilies, the same kind June had placed there that day. She knelt down, brushing away a few fallen leaves, and whispered, "You were right, Mom. Love never dies. It just waits for us to see it." Her voice cracked as she continued, "I've started something for you, something that helps women like you. And I know you'd tell me I didn't need to. But I did. I needed to. I needed to make it right." She laughed softly through her tears. "You'd probably scold me for crying too much right now." She stayed there until the sky turned orange and the air grew cool. Before she left, she placed a folded note on the grave, her own words this time. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for loving me when I didn't deserve it. I finally understand what your kind of love feels like. I'll spend the rest of my life passing it on." From that day forward, Aria's life became an echo of mine, not in suffering but in strength. She learned to find joy in small things, the laughter of children, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the kindness of strangers. She found peace in helping others and forgiveness in herself. And though I was no longer there in body, I was with her in every act of compassion, every choice to love instead of resent. She didn't know it, but that had always been my greatest wish, not that she would miss me, but that she would become me in the best possible way. One evening, as she was closing the foundation office, June handed her a small envelope. "This came in the mail today," she said. "There's no return address, but I think you'll want to see it." Aria frowned, taking it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable, slightly shaky, familiar, mine. Her heart stopped for a moment. "That's impossible," she whispered. June smiled knowingly. "Some things have a way of finding us when we're ready." Aria turned the envelope over in her hands, tears forming in her eyes as she recognized the writing on the front. But one day, she received a letter in my handwriting. Some promises transcend life itself. Arya sat in her office. The lights dimmed, the sound of rain tapping against the window. The envelope trembled in her hands. It was aged slightly, sealed neatly, with my familiar handwriting looping across the front. For my daughter, when you're ready. Her breath hitched. I had written that phrase before. The same words had been on the envelope inside the chest. But this one, had arrived out of nowhere. She stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might hold. Part of her wondered if it was some kind of mistake, if June had just found something old. But another part of her? The one that had come to believe in signs, in forgiveness, and in love that stretched beyond death, whispered that this was meant to happen. She broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, yellowed around the edges but still smelling faintly of rosewater and ink. She unfolded it slowly. My handwriting filled the page, steady at first, then faint and uneven, written not long before my hands had grown too weak to hold a pen. My sweet Arya, if this letter has found you, it means you've done what I hoped you would. You've listened, you've learned, and you've opened your heart. I asked June to keep this one for last, because I wanted it to reach you only when you were truly ready to understand me, not as your mother, but as a woman. I know life hasn't been easy for you. I know you've carried guilt, pain, and anger, but I need you to know that none of it was ever stronger than my love for you. You never needed to prove anything to me. You never had to be perfect. You were enough from the moment you were born. Arya pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, tears falling freely. She could almost hear my voice, the same gentle cadence from the recordings, filling the room again. When you were little, you used to tell me that one day you'd make me proud. You already had. You made me proud every time you smiled, every time you got back up after falling. I never wanted you to be the richest or the best, I just wanted you to be kind, to love yourself, and to see the goodness I always saw in you. I know we lost each other for a while, but that's what life does. Arya, it tests love in ways we don't understand until it's too late. I forgive you, my darling. I hope you've forgiven me too. Arya's sobs broke the stillness of the room. She pressed the letter to her heart, whispering, I forgive you, Mom. I do. She continued reading, her tears dripping onto the ink. There's something else I need to tell you. Remember that little savings account your father started for you? You thought it was gone, but it's still there. The lawyer has instructions to transfer it to you now. But please, don't use it for yourself. Use it for someone who needs it more. Maybe one of the women you're helping through the foundation. That money wasn't meant for comfort. It was meant for beginnings. Let it start a new story for someone else. Her chest tightened as she read. Even in death, I had found a way to give, to keep loving. It was both beautiful and unbearable. By now, I imagine you've created something wonderful. I can feel it. And if you've done that, then my heart is at peace. You've turned pain into purpose. That's what I always prayed you'd learn. Remember, I am with you in your laughter, in your kindness, in the way you help others. When the sun warms your face, that's me. When the wind brushes your cheek, that's me too. Love doesn't die, Arya. It just changes form. You'll see me everywhere if you look closely enough. Arya broke down completely then, her sobs raw and full. The rain outside grew heavier, matching the rhythm of her tears. She could feel me there, my voice, my warmth, my presence, not as a ghost but as a feeling deep in her bones. This is my final letter to you, my darling girl. Not because I'm gone, but because you no longer need my words to hear my love. You've found your way. You've become everything I dreamed you'd be: strong, compassionate, and brave enough to face the truth. Keep living. Keep giving. Keep loving. That's all I ever wanted for you. You were never my burden, Arya. You were my reason. Arya's tears fell onto those last lines, smudging the ink slightly. She read them again and again until she could barely see the letters. Then she held the paper to her heart, whispering, I was your reason. And you were mine. After a while, she stood and looked around her office. On one wall hung photos of the women and children the foundation had helped: smiling faces, new beginnings, lives changed. She realized that everything in that room, every good thing that existed in her life now, was because of me. Because of love that didn't stop, even after death. Evening. She framed the letter and hung it in her office beside my photo, the one from her graduation day, where I'd been smiling so proudly, holding her hand as if I'd never let go. She added a small plaque beneath it with the words, "The Celine Hope Fund, for every mother who ever gave everything." When she finished, she stepped back and whispered, "You did it, Mom. You're still here." And in that quiet room, filled with the warmth of our story, she felt it, the air shift, a faint, comforting presence. Maybe it was her imagination, or maybe it was me, proud and at peace, standing right beside her. That day, she renamed the foundation the Celine Hope Fund. Sometimes love waits for us in the quietest moments. Months passed after Aria framed my final letter, yet my words never left her. She carried them with her everywhere, not on paper, but in her heart. She'd whisper parts of the letter under her breath whenever she felt uncertain. "You were never my burden. You were my reason." It became her anchor, the rhythm that guided her through each day. The foundation grew faster than she ever expected. People from all over the state began writing to her mothers who were struggling, daughters seeking forgiveness, women searching for hope. Aria read every message, answering each one with care. For the first time, her days weren't filled with noise or distraction but purpose. She no longer woke up thinking about what she lacked. She woke up thinking about who she could help. And still, in the quiet moments between meetings or while driving home, she would think of me. She'd imagine me sitting beside her, smiling that tired but proud smile she remembered from childhood. Sometimes she'd even talk to me out loud, the way she used to when she was little. "Mom, you'd laugh at me," she'd say softly while stuck in traffic. "I burn my toast every morning, just like you did." She'd chuckle through the tears, feeling a warmth that words couldn't explain. On the 1-year anniversary of my passing, Aria decided to visit the lake, the one where we used to go when life was simpler, when the world still felt safe. It was early morning, the air cool and still, the water mirroring the pastel sky. She parked the car and walked to the edge, her shoes sinking slightly into the damp grass. The familiar scent of wildflowers drifted in the air. She sat on the same weathered bench where we used to eat sandwiches and talk about her dreams. For a long time, she said nothing. She just listened to the wind rustling through the trees, to the birds singing somewhere in the distance, to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She thought of all the years she'd wasted resenting me, of all the chances she'd missed to say the words that now came so easily. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I was so cruel. I didn't understand what love looked like. I thought love was supposed to make life easier. I didn't realize it was the reason we survive it." Her voice broke as she wiped away tears. "You were right about everything. I used to think you were small, but you were the strongest person I've ever known. You gave me everything and asked for nothing back." She sat there for hours, watching the sunlight dance on the water. At one point, a small white feather drifted through the air, caught by a gentle breeze. It floated down slowly, spinning as it descended, and landed right in her open palm. She gasped softly, her eyes filling again. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "is that you?" She smiled through her tears, clutching the feather to her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For never giving up on me, for showing me what love really means." The air seemed to grow warmer around her. The clouds parted, and sunlight spilled over the lake, painting everything gold. She closed her eyes and breathed it in. It felt like an embrace, not a physical one, but something deeper, almost sacred. When she finally stood, she felt lighter, like a burden she'd been carrying for years had quietly lifted. The feather still rested in her palm, fragile but real. She tucked it into her pocket, smiling softly. It wasn't just a sign, it was a promise kept. As she walked back to her car, she noticed a group of young women sitting near the water, laughing with their children. One of them looked exhausted but happy, holding a baby close. Aria stopped for a moment, her heart swelling. She saw a reflection of me in that woman, the same tired eyes, the same fierce love. And in that instant, she realized something profound. I wasn't gone. I never had been. I lived in every act of kindness she witnessed, in every heart she touched through the foundation, in every breath of compassion she gave to the world. Later that evening, back at her office, Arya unlocked the chest once more. It had been months since she'd opened it. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it, the letters, the tapes, the journals. She smiled softly and whispered, "I don't need to listen anymore, Mom. I remember it all." Still, she reached for one of the tapes at random and pressed play. My voice filled the room again, full of warmth and life. "Arya," I had said, "if you're hearing this, then you've found the strength I always knew you had. Promise me you'll keep living bravely. Don't let pain turn your heart cold. Love. Even when it hurts. That's where healing begins." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of peace, she whispered. "I promise, Mom." From that night on, Arya made it a ritual. Every year, on the same day, she returned to the lake with fresh lilies, my favorite flowers, and sat on that old bench. She didn't cry as much anymore. She'd smile, tell me about the foundation's progress, about the families they'd helped, about the lives that had changed because of one mother's love. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she'd hear a faint whisper through the rustling leaves, or maybe it was just memory playing tricks. Either way, she'd smile and answer back softly, "I love you too." Arya eventually became known for her kindness, her strength, her wisdom. People would ask her what inspired her to dedicate her life to helping others, and she would simply say, "My mother gave me the greatest gift. She taught me that love never dies." That sentence became the foundation's motto, printed on every brochure, every plaque, every wall. Love never dies, it simply changes form. Years later, as Arya looked out over the lake one last time before moving to expand the foundation, she felt that same peace she'd felt the day she found the feather. She smiled, knowing I was there. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered into the wind. "For everything." And in that still, golden moment, a warmth brushed her cheek like a kiss carried by the breeze, the quiet answer she'd been waiting for all her life. And that was the moment my daughter finally understood what I had left behind.